What's up, guys, and welcome back to On the Brick. As a lot of you know, last year I made a video talking about Brickvault's Naboo Starfighter. And if you have been following this channel for a while, you know that video had a rather interesting reaction. And in the 5 months since that video came out, I have received a lot of comments saying a lot of different things. Some that were good, and others that were not so good. And while I would normally just ignore the negative comments, I have received 3 similar ones over and over and over again. Along with that, I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about this set. Obviously, I had a conversation with Brickvault about it. Well, about many things, and you can see that here, but this set was part of it. And I also very recently had an opportunity where I didn't necessarily rebuild this, but I basically did. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But for right now, I did want to focus on those 3 criticisms that I continuously receive in that first video. Not only because I think that talking about them will help give a better understanding of this set, but also because they help me realize that I did not do a good enough job explaining my thoughts properly. So what are those 3 comments? Number 1 is always, well, if you built it out of real Lego, then it wouldn't be a problem. Number 2 is always something along the lines of, well, you probably just built it wrong. It's not the design that's bad. And the one that is by far the most popular is, why are you hating on Brickvault? Stop hating. And I actually wanted to start by talking about that last point, mainly because I can cover it in a single sentence. I don't hate Brickvault. This channel only exists because of what they do. Without them putting together an easy location to gather all of these instructions, I would not have ever thought about actually making this channel. I mean, I probably would have liked to, but them doing that made it significantly easier and motivated me a lot more. They are consistently putting out high quality sets in a lot of different themes that I absolutely love. I'm incredibly thankful to have been able to speak with them and for a lot of the things they've done since then. Just because I am criticizing one of the things that they made doesn't mean that I hate them. It just means that I want them to be better. That's what constructive criticism is all about, and especially in an industry like YouTube, or even in one where you're putting out your own creations to the world, and yes, I know most of these are the creations of other people, you're going to get criticism. It's just how the world works. For instance, I actually do a lot of creative writing, and I am consistently being criticized for my writing. Now, I could buckle down, say, no, what I did was correct and you are wrong. Or I could look at what I'm being told and use it to improve my own abilities and my own writing. What I'm trying to say here is that when I am criticizing Brickvault, I'm not saying that they are wrong or they are horrible or that I hate them. I'm just saying, here's what I would like to see next time. Because I have a lot of experience with custom builds and mocks, especially theirs. And full credit to Brickvault, they do accept a constructive criticism. I have seen it firsthand multiple times. So even though the important part was that they would get it, which they did, I still wanted to explain that because it's something that I see on a lot of my more negative videos. So please do keep that in mind as I once again go over what is my personal least favorite set of theirs. So with that said, let's go over the other 2 criticisms. Well, if you built it out of real Lego, it wouldn't be a problem. This was a comment I didn't really understand that much until Brickvault helped explain it to me. Again, if you have followed my channel for a while, then you probably already know that I personally don't really have a problem with alternative brands, and I definitely have a whole video plan to explain that, as it's not really a black or white thing. But in the conversation with Brickvault, they explained that they couldn't make out the Lego logo on the studs. And I'm sorry, but I really just have to say that if that's what you're doing, well, I would hope that you would have something better to do in your life. And by no means do I mean that as an insult to Brickvault or to any of the countless people who have done that. But I want you to take a second to think about what you're actually doing there and what that actually means. Because this is 100% genuine LEGO, it has always been. I bought every single piece off of Brickvault for about $65 shipped from 3 different sellers. Every single last piece on this build is and has always been 100% genuine LEGO. But really, what does that say when you hear my criticisms in the last video and the first thought you have is, no, nothing he said can be true, it's that he's using bad plastic. Which, as I'll show in just a second here, doesn't really make that much sense. And it's also just an incredibly dangerous thought to have. Closing your mind to a single idea where you're unwilling to think of other possibilities or realities is incredibly dangerous, no matter what that is, even when it's something as simple as LEGO. I cannot properly express right now just how flabbergasted I continue to be when I receive comments like that. This die-hard loyalism to LEGO is a little weird, to be honest. And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with LEGO, it has earned its reputation, rightfully, the good and the bad. But again, as I'll show you shortly, the type of plastic I use really didn't make a difference. Because everything here has been LEGO the entire time. All of it has been. And that didn't stop the wings from continuously falling off, that didn't stop the sides from falling off, that didn't stop the underside of the cockpit and the tail from falling off. Absolutely none of those things have to do with the type of plastic used. And I will absolutely say that this set has held together extremely well since that time. It has fallen apart on me multiple times when I've tried to move it, but really only the wings are falling off now, and there is good reason for that. At the same time, if you recall in the last video, I did glue most of this together, which, yes, is the thing that people do, and that's the biggest reason I wasn't able to rebuild this one. Well, not this one. Now, ever since I put out that video, because of that video saying that it was fragile, Brickvault went ahead and did a quality test. To be clear, it's a durability test where rather comically they drop it in the first few seconds. And of course dropping any set will make it fall apart, but what else it showed was how certain sections of this build are actually rather resilient. They then proceed to handle the model in various different ways, albeit they were handling it in an extremely delicate manner at times. However, they also held their model by one of the engines, which is something that I would not do on mine, as it would absolutely fall apart. And yeah, once you know where to pick up this model from, it's a lot easier to handle, and in turn won't necessarily fall apart on you. And kudos to them for putting out that video, which of course will be linked down below. However, I don't think I was clear enough in my original video. As I've said multiple times, the wings have fallen off on me plenty of times since completing the model. But the main issue with fragility is when you're putting the pieces together, not necessarily after you've completed the build. And that was 100% on me. I believe that I did mention it, but I obviously didn't talk about it or explain it well enough. To me, when I was putting the different sub-builds of this model together, I continuously had an incredibly difficult time doing so. Particularly with the wings, as I've said, but also with the tail and the underside here. I mentioned it in the last video, but this entire underside is only connected to the rest of the model through 2 studs here. There's a bracket that you have to push up from underneath and then into a 1x2 Technic brick with 2 holes in it. Not only is that a little challenging to do as these joysticks are fragile and will fall off, it's also just not a very stable connection, especially with everything underneath. Now, once you get it in there, it will pretty much stay, but for me, I did glue it a little bit more, as when I tried to put the wings and tail on later, it kept falling out. In this particular area, I don't think the glue was super necessary, as once it's in, it's pretty much just gonna stay there. And this is where I wanted to talk about the second criticism that I've already started to touch on. You probably just built it wrong, it's not the design that's bad. The instructions on this set aren't very good. If you saw the video before I had to blur them, then you'll know exactly what I mean. And if all goes well, I'll probably be showing individual steps here, as I think I should be okay doing that. If not, then they'll just be blurred again. And when I say that, I just mean I'm going to be showing 2 individual steps and nothing more than that, as they encapsulate the problem with the instructions. And when I say that these instructions are bad, I want you to remember that I literally have hundreds of instructions for custom builds. Even the ones that I haven't physically built yet, I have gone through and looked at and several times built digitally. This is the worst out of all of them. Now, that means that when you are building this set, you're kind of forced to pay extra attention. If and when you miss a piece in this set, you are very quickly going to figure it out, and then you'll have to go back and see where you messed up. This means that when I was building this, I had to take my sweet time on every single step and double, triple, and quadruple check that I was doing things correctly. Not only that, but I actually built the majority of this set digitally as well, meaning that I built it twice there, and, well, you'll see soon. Here to say, I can guarantee you that it wasn't that I built it wrong. You physically cannot put this set together if you do it wrong. And I also need to mention that the designer Inthert has made several rather fragile builds. And again, I understand all too well not really wanting to accept that something or someone you like could be bad or could have done something wrong. But nobody is perfect, and it is a reality of life that needs to be accepted. Everyone is going to make mistakes, but learning from them is how we grow. Think about it this way. If you like Brickvault, wouldn't you rather see their quality improve? Because I know I would. Because, yeah, this set is the outlier. Well, sort of. I have one other of theirs I've yet to show off that I really don't like. But just because this one set is something that I didn't necessarily like doesn't mean that I'm wrong, nor does it mean that Brickvault's bad. It just means that this was one particular set of theirs that I happen to not like. But I couldn't help get that first comment out of my mind, the one where everybody kept saying if I built this out of real Lego, it would be different. And recently, I had the opportunity to find out, what if I built this out of alternative brand bricks? So I did. Now, a few things about this set. First, the one and only reason that I got it is because I had already paid full price for the instructions from Brickvault and built the original out of Lego, and my curiosity. Second, this set only cost me $20, a third of the cost of the normal Lego one. But, as I'm sure you can tell as this spins around, there are several key differences here. However, I'm going to be completely clear, they have nothing to do with the bricks. The person that I got this from had to inventory all of the pieces themselves by hand, and obviously, non-Lego doesn't really have everything that Lego does. For instance, this is the real Lego version, and this piece on the engine here is incredibly rare and pretty expensive because of that. Same with this off-colored yellow piece in the back. So in the alternative brand version, neither of those exist. This is just your typical yellow thing, just like the gray pieces here, and obviously that back piece also got replaced. This is actually a rather common practice with alternative brands, and most of the time isn't too much of a problem, but ended up being a pretty big issue with this set. While I was told that only about 4 pieces had been replaced, it was closer to about 20 or 30 pieces that either had a weird replacement or just didn't come with the set. And of course I know in saying that all of the people who hate non-Lego are celebrating and going, oh, I told you so. But remember, the quality of the pieces themselves are not the problem. For instance, on the side here you can see there is a bit of a gap. The cockpit cannot fully lower because of a problem with the back, and I just did not receive the 2x3 wedge pieces that are covered here. I replaced the one on the other side with the piece that I had, but did not have the appropriate one for this side. That of course means that there is a gap here, but that can be easily fixed when and if I get those pieces. Another problematic area here is this section where, as you can see, there is a minifig hand inside, because in the design of the set, that is rather cleverly how the bracket piece, or the panel piece I should say, goes here. I had to remove them as the tail was interfering with it, but again, that's more to do with the tail. The piece is held just fine. In fact, the problem with the tail is that this replacement piece is far too small. The other one is designed for the piece that's supposed to go here. So when you have the proper piece in place, these side areas don't hit those panels. Underneath the ship, you can tell some very noticeable color changes. Even though they are noticeable, they don't actually stand out, as you never really see the underside here. The long story short of this is that there are a lot of missing or bad pieces that make buying this for $20 not even worth it. Just get the $60 version. I mean, honestly, this gets you about 80% of the way there. You would really only need, like I said, maybe 20 extra pieces, which would still be a lot cheaper. But I wouldn't actually recommend either version yet, at least not until Brickvault updates it, as they said they are working on doing. And the reason for that is because as I was putting this together, something extremely interesting happened. First, I realized that it was a lot easier to follow the instructions. Again, since the original video came out, Brickvault have said they were able to follow the instructions just fine. And I kind of always had the idea, but now it seems more confirmed that that is simply because of the amount of times that they've looked at it and gone through it. Like I said, I have probably gone through these instructions start to finish at least 4 or 5 times now. There are still some extremely confusing places, and I would definitely update these instructions, but they were easier to go through this time around. But the other far more interesting thing that happened is that all of the problems I faced when building the original LEGO version, I faced in the same exact places here. The wings continued to fall off, the tail didn't hold, and the underside was impossible to put on. In fact, just to be sure, I actually switched out several pieces with genuine LEGO. For instance, here is the bracket of the non-LEGO version, and yes, this is a genuine LEGO piece, and it still struggled to hold. You might be thinking, what about the Technic brick that it goes into? That's also genuine LEGO, and the genuine bracket going into the genuine Technic brick genuinely struggled to hold the connection. Again, there is a moment where you can feel it click into place, but it's still way more fragile than I would like. Here are the connections for the wings, where you can hopefully make out that I replaced the turntable pieces with genuine LEGO as well. And yeah, the entire wing structure is holding on to those 4 studs. And it's actually kind of hard to count the outer 2 as they're only connected to the inner 2 via that one plate and slope. Plus, turntables just aren't a very stable connecting piece. But this issue that I have here, where this archway isn't connecting to the stud, is the same exact issue that I'm having on the other build. The real LEGO version also fails to connect properly there. And I know that I could just push it down, but every time I did, that's when the other sections would start coming off. And then supposedly, you're supposed to just be able to connect the wing like this, but as you can see, it's not that simple, and part of it is, again, because these turntable pieces aren't really meant to be used for this. It's very clever that they are, but it's also incredibly weak. But as you can see, once I fidget around with this a little bit, I can put the wing on and get it to somewhat stay. But these wings have continued to give me the same type of trouble as I've had in the other build. These are the areas that, for some reason for me, just don't stay on. In fact, here they are both sitting perfectly fine on the build, but when I go to pick it up, they both just fell off. That wasn't planned. This was literally 2 seconds after I just secured them. And I'm gonna leave this uncut, but here is me trying to reattach them, and as you can see, even though it should be really simple, they just keep falling. But John, that didn't happen with the real LEGO version. It did. A lot. And it still does. A lot. Which is why I was handling it extremely carefully and just don't even touch it anymore. That's why when I bring it in, I'm holding it with 2 hands, and usually when I'm moving it around, I'm basically carrying it on my arm. Jack explained to me how these wings are supposed to go on, but I just don't know what I'm doing differently here. But regardless, having built this twice, once with genuine LEGO and once with non-LEGO, I think having the same problems in the same areas should say something. Yes, I personally prefer more stable builds, but there's a reason for that. To me, LEGO is therapeutic, it's calming, and it's helpful. Whenever I'm having anything but a good day, I tend to turn to LEGO. It helps calm me down when I'm angry, cheer me up when I'm sad, and help me contemplate my surroundings when I need to think about life. The physical action of clicking the pieces together is actually incredibly therapeutic and calming. And there is always this wonderful satisfaction with finishing a build that I did. Being able to look around my home and seeing all of these builds knowing that I put them together is really nice, actually. So, is it really that bad that I want a satisfying build? I fully understand that when building mocks, you're going to get a different experience than building LEGO sets. And I go into them knowing that. I know that there are going to be differences and there are going to be parts that are challenging. But there is a difference between challenging and frustrating. A good challenge is always welcomed. Like, I'm sure that their Ghost will be a challenge to put together one day. But I don't think it will be frustrating. This set was frustrating and it was aggravating. It wasn't therapeutic, it wasn't calming, it wasn't helpful, it just made me mad, and in the original video, obviously that comes through, but I didn't do a good enough job explaining why. And hopefully in the last 22 minutes I did a better job. Because this is an absolutely beautiful looking set, but the instructions need to be redone, and I'm very glad that's being worked on. I personally think that if the instructions were more quote-unquote normal, the frustration level would plummet, and it would be a more enjoyable build. The stability issues in the various parts of the ship would still definitely exist, but at least you would be able to handle those without the frustration of trying to decipher the instructions. I mean, seriously, this is one of the steps that you get. Good luck. Okay, I'm not being entirely fair. There's another part here that I'm not showing because you would be able to figure out how to build most of the set otherwise. But 5 months later, having thought this over a lot, having built a second version of this, has anything changed? Well, like I said, even though the instructions are incredibly frustrating, having gone through them a second time, it was easier to understand. I do think someone looking at them for the first time will be incredibly confused and more frustrated than they should be, and all of the structural issues that I said were there are very much there. But that's the sacrifice that comes when making a custom set. I'm sure, because obviously there are other ways to connect the underside to the rest of the build, but I don't know if there's a way to do that while still keeping the look of the Naboo Starfighter. I'm positive that there are much stronger ways to connect the wings, but again, how much of that will sacrifice the look? And obviously that's a question on its own. Should stability be sacrificed for looks? Some people say yes, some people say no. There isn't really a right answer to that. So while I personally can't recommend this set, if you want it, go for it. Just know what you're getting into. Also, there are 2 quick points that I wanted to make at the end here that don't really matter, but sort of do. If you buy this, build the stand. Part of the reason that I continuously have issues with the wings is because they are continuously hitting the ground. Put it on a stand, avoid that issue. A while ago, Jarek, who has designed plenty of sets for Brickvault, suggested to me that I should put in some sort of rating system. I can't really think of anything too clever at the moment because it is 1:06 in the morning, but I would give it a 4 or maybe 5 out of 10. A big reason for that are the instructions, which, make no mistake, are definitely a part of this. If the instructions were better though, I would still only bump it up to like a 6 or 6.5. The actual build is rather frustrating. There are some cool techniques and the final product does look good, but unfortunately getting it to that point is more troublesome than I would like it to be. With all that said, please do let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Remember to like this video or dislike it, either is fine, I really want to know your thoughts, and remember to subscribe if you want to see more custom LEGO. A huge thank you to all of my patrons who actually made this video possible, including Jonathan, Jaden, Project Elements, JVP, and everyone else as well. You can join them at the link in the description down below. I need to go to sleep. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.